Lovely and darling viewers, it's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing the Starlit Wood New Fairy Tales, which is edited by Dominik Parisien and Navah, Wolfe, which I totally probably mispronounced. This is a collection of 18 fairy tale retellings from a diverse group of authors, and they have a very diverse group of retellings. I enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's definitely like a mixed bag here. Like some of these stories I really loved, and some of them were like, yeah, not so much. And one story, there's a retelling of Thumbelina, which I didn't even finish. Just basically because I don't like the story of Thumbelina. It wasn't necessarily the retelling in here. So it has a mix of well-known authors like Catherynne, M. Valente, Garth, Naomi, Novik, Jeffrey Ford, and others, and then lesser-known authors, and then it mixes in also. It also has a mix of well-known fairy tales like Rumpelstiltskin and Sleeping Beauty, with lesser-known ones that I'd never heard of before. I really enjoyed going into this and starting each story fresh and not knowing what was going to happen. So I liked doing it that way, so this review is gonna kind of just be really vague. There is a table of contents in here which lists every story, every author, and their like the story that they're originally based off of. So if you just wanted to go through and find one, you could do that. But then every story is set up like this, where you just have the title and the author, and it doesn't tell you the basis. There's kind of a picture here which kind of sets up the typographical picture there, which kind of sets up like the setting and stuff, which is cool, but doesn't necessarily give away what story it's based off of. So I liked kind of reading them and trying to figure out like which stories they were. And then there's a not author's note at the end, which is the author of that story explaining why they retold that story that way, which story they were retelling. And I found these really fascinating too. So I liked the way this book was set up. The introduction, the two editors talk about fairy tales as this evolving collective storytelling experiences, that it's not until like the Brothers Grimm that we really start collecting them in books and they become solid. So for much of history, fairy tales were passed down orally and they would evolve and change as they were retold. And so this is just another evolution of these fairy tales and changing them and retelling them, which is awesome. I really loved it. There's a mix of settings in here. So some of them have traditional fairy tale settings. You know, the woods, medieval cities, homeland Russia. Like, they're not that different from the original story setting wise, and some of these are picked up and put somewhere completely different, like being set in a modern city or being set in the Wild West, or some of them are set in the future and in space. So I liked that idea that these could, every time you start a new story, it can just put you anywhere. And they're also introducing more modern ideas to some of these stories. A couple of them deal with drugs. There's one about robots that have artificial intelligence and how they're like small animals. There's one that has to do with video games and about a radio show and hanging out in a bar and stuff. And so the ideas and settings, like how these stories are each approached, is incredibly different too, depending on the author and what they were trying to tell. There's also a lot of differences with diversity. Some of these characters are Middle Eastern or Asian. So I liked the mix of characters. Like some of them are, like the first one of them is Native American. So we get different voices. There are stories about women saving themselves and saving others. So it's not just the prince coming and rescuing them. And there's even a story in here about a woman who doesn't want kids, and really struggling with motherhood when you don't want it, which I think is interesting also. So some of these are very romantic stories, and some of them are much more about fighting, good versus evil, or struggling to find your place in the world. I found it truly fascinating. I know this is incredibly vague, but I really enjoyed going into each story not knowing what they were going to be when I got there. there were a couple of authors that I was super excited to read stories from, like reading Naomi Novik's and reading Garth Nix's stories. But it was also surprising to see authors that I'd never heard of before, and now, like, maybe I want to go read those authors now and find, like, their actual novels. Um, this also made me want to go and read the originals, whether it's rereading a story that I've grown up with or going to find some of the stories that I've never heard of before, which is good too. Yeah. There's nothing in here that I was like horrified by and like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Why would you? I think it's good. It just adds to the mythology of these stories. We still have the originals. You can go read them and listen to them and watch them in movies, but like, it's cool to have these takes on them also. So, yeah. I recommend this. I gave it 4 stars. It's pretty awesome if you like fairy tales like me. Yeah. Peace out. I love you guys and keep reading.